2024. Christina, do you want to send?
We need people online. I can see who's here.
Okay. So you get attendance online there?
We have Debbie is online and Larry.
Renee's here. Renee's here.
All righty, perfect. Okay, so then. Is there a new agenda in the binder? Thank you. Okay, so then.
If you go to the orange tab, that says committee bylaws. And then the last green page there, the first green page from the pack. You should see it. So start at the orange committee bylaws, work in the first green page, and it'll be right there.
Hey, Brad, if you could in the future, put the most current agenda on top.
So next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? No, seeing none. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Is there a second? Second by Mitchell. All in favor of approving the agenda, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Wonderful. The agenda passes. Approval of the minutes. First, we'll take the 9:15 minutes.
And one there, please.
That was in the meeting that those. Any other changes or anything here to 9:15 minutes? All right, is there a motion to approve those minutes? By Steve, is there a second to approve the minutes? Second, and all in favor of approving the minutes for 9:15 meeting? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and the minutes carry from the 9:15 meeting and they are accepted. Going on to 9:29 minutes, are there any changes to the minutes from the September 29th meeting?
We're at the minute.
And these were emailed out as well.
The minutes are included in our notebook.
Behind such a.
Behind the yellow.
They're right back. The agenda for tonight.
Mhm.
The info maybe.
Back.
Yeah.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, I thought the tab.
There you go.
Yeah.
That in after the green.
We'll just wait a minute while Vicky. I'll settle here.
That's the agenda for today. So that the minutes.
Minutes right. Thank you. Disapproval.
All right.
That's our little page.
September 29th.
Yeah, so we have 15. The 29th is, 2 pages after. So we have, the way that it's set up, you have the agenda for tonight. Next 3 pages are the September 15th agenda. And the pages after that. The next 5 pages are the September 29th.
Are there any questions or anything on those minutes or anything that needs to be changed? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as distributed? So moved. Is there a second? Second by Julie. All in favor of accepting the previous meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, and the minutes are approved. Next, we'll go ahead and read the opening statement. Statement of Plan Steering Committee. Welcome all to the Historic West Des Moines Master Plan Steering Committee meetings. The committee is made up of independent volunteer citizens. The makeup of the committee is determined by the mayor and city council. The committee is not part of city administration. Oh, sorry. The steering committee is served in our efforts by the city of West Des Moines staff. The committee's purpose is to, 1, partner with the city of West Des Moines to build interest, excitement, awareness, and community consensus around a comprehensive strategy for historic West Des Moines by representing the diverse interests of current businesses, residents, and investors. Number 2, work towards updating the master plan to address growth and redevelopment going forward into the future. Number 3, make recommendations and provide guidance to the city council on matters pertaining to the creation, revising, and implementation of the historic West Des Moines master plan. It is our goal that the meeting is orderly. We encourage discussion, but recognize the fact that there will be differences of opinion. We request that everyone is shown mutual reverence and discussions are conducted in a respectful manner. To ensure the meeting does not become unnecessary and lengthy, we ask that everyone's testimony be focused on new facts or evidence not already presented. If you wish to speak, please come forward, wait to be recognized by the chair, and then state your name and address for the record. Rules for public comment. When speaking, members of the public should state their name and address prior to making their comments. Each member of the public will be given 5 minutes to speak. All statements at the meeting shall be directed to the committee, and cross-conversation among those in attendance is prohibited. Questions shall be directed first to the chair, who may then ask the proper person to answer, with such answer also being directed to the committee. When the opportunity for public comment is closed, the public may only address the committee if a question is directed to them. In closing, this committee does not make final decisions. All recommendations made will be forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council final action. Yes.
Debbie had raised her hand. I believe she had a comment. Oh, I was like, so.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Okay. Teams came on for me anyway after attendance would have been called, so I don't know if that happened to anybody else, but I just wanted to make sure that this was working properly and that I was showing up on the Teams app.
Yes, we saw you on there, Debbie, and we counted you as in attendance.
All right, thank you. Just wanting
Yes,
to make sure.
Absolutely. All right, moving on next to the next item on the agenda will be Citizens Forum. If there's anyone in Citizens Forum that would like to address the committee on anything not pertaining to the agenda items, now would be your time to speak. Seeing no comment, we'll go ahead and close Citizen Forum and move on to the next item, which is existing conditions and what we've heard from Tesca. And I believe we have Mike here. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So I believe you'll have a presentation for us, so we would hold comment until after presentation and questions, if that's okay with you.
Actually, what we're going to do is do a little presentation, then I have a section where I do to be back, and then some more presentations. I won't go back.
Perfect.
All right, but I'll give you more of this what to do. All right.
Absolutely.
It is good to be here. Let's see. Done this little play, no clicker. Give me one. All right. So basically, the game plan is, we've been doing a lot of listening over the last month, right? We've gone out to neighborhood groups, we've met with the foundation, we've met with people individually. We've done a lot of outreach. I want to kind of give you a summary of what we've heard so far. Then I want to go back to the concept we had at our last workshop, actually, where we were looking at kind of best practice from different parts of the country. We heard a lot from Jason about all the great work that they're doing in the community that he's in Ohio. But obviously, that's only one example, right? So I want to give you some other examples and kind of talk to you about that and give you some links for some more information. Then I want to kind of give you a preview and talk about what we're going to be doing at our workshop next Wednesday night, which is the visual preference survey, which is a really big deal. And we want to make sure that we're going in the right direction before we finalize that. I'll give you a preview of that. We got Brad.
One more second here.
All right. So. Right.
It's an answer, Brad, when he needs to be fastest.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that it's. Yeah, we can.
Right, my thing's not doing anything, so. Brad. All right, that's just the overall timeline, essentially to say that we started out looking at where things are, and we're pretty much done with that. We will be very shortly. We're moving quickly into the visioning and design guideline piece of this thing with our accelerated timeline to have kind of the design guidelines and the zoning piece done around March 1st. So we're moving very quickly ahead on that. So a couple of the existing conditions, things that I would normally present to you already, have kind of gotten put to the wayside a little bit, so I could jump ahead with the visual preference survey a little bit. So I'm not showing you maps of existing land use and those kind of things, which you guys know anyway, but we do have to vet and document. So we've skipped over a little bit of that to advance the visual preference survey, but nothing critical, and we can certainly loop back to those things later on. All right, awesome. All right, so we met with 3 different neighborhood organizations, 2 of them at the same time. So we thank you guys for doing a joint meeting. Some of the things that we were hearing, right? And there was a whole long list, the way we published, I think we published it already, the SharePoint. Yeah, we will, of all the details of it. So I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights of things that kind of reoccurred and popped up to in discussions. One, in terms, we asked a series of questions. What did you move or stay to this area? Small town and big city. That comes up over and over again, right? But that's clearly something that's very true of the area we're talking about. It is very walkable. You've got a grid street system there that works well, and things are short blocks and connected. That's great character. It's a front porch neighborhood, right? People kind of are out in the street and that kind of thing, and those are really strong things. It's a tight knit neighborhood. Neighbors look out for each other. You know, it's older homes with some character, and every house isn't the same. It's not like a brand new subdivision where it's kind of a cookie cutter thing each. So lots of great reasons why people move to this area. One I don't actually see listed on this list, but I heard over and over again too, was this area is very convenient to the whole region, right? You're in the middle of everything, and yet it's easy to get to, in and out of, but it's not terribly dense, I guess I would say. What are some of the challenges that we're looking at? Property maintenance came up in a couple of number of cases. People were concerned about that. And some of the issues with sewer systems, and not the city sewer system necessarily, but the Orangeburg, which is a new term I never heard of. But now I understand, and that came up as a repeated issue in certain situations, and the cost of doing that, the cost of buying into, while the homes are relatively affordable in this area, when you buy one, you need to have some money budgeted aside to fix it up and repair or replace the windows, the roof, or whatever needs to be done. But there are things with older homes that you have to take care of. So that came up repeatedly. Obviously, there have been some conflicts lately between new construction and old construction, and not everybody necessarily getting along or agreeing on where we want to go, which is one of the reasons we're here tonight, right? To get all on the same page and pull those things together. But that did come up. There's some fear and concern that we're losing kind of the historic character of the downtown area and the 5th Street area. And so those things came up. Some concern about increased crime came up as some of the things we were talking about. What else we talked about? We talked about what has changed for the worse in this area, right? There are some people that are definitely concerned about parking. We have done survey work on that. I'll report that back to you at the next meeting or in the future about, we did actually parking counts over a couple-day period to see if there are locations in the area that have got a significant parking problem, or at certain times of the day, or there's no problem. So we'll come back to that. Some people are certainly concerned with some of the newer development that we've had in the area and the look, feel, and character of that. And as it relates to parking too, those are closely related issues. Some felt that there was, a lot of hoops to jump through to get assistance from the city. Preserving the character of the area is a concern for people, and making sure that whatever is built new reflects the character of the area. That's why we're doing the design guidelines and those kind of things. Again, safety came up. In terms of what has changed for the better, people mentioned some of the capital improvements that the city has done in terms of streets and alleys and other sidewalks and those kind of things. There's been some great some great redevelopment. I've heard over and over again how everybody loves St. Kilda's and Winchester and a couple of those projects. Park and bike improvements, particularly Legion Park and the new trail along Ninth came up as positives. The fact that you have active neighborhood organizations in this area that does provide a voice is certainly a plus and a positive for this area. Some of them being newer voices in the area. And the housing stock was determined to be kind of a strong positive for the area in terms of built homes being improved. People are reinvesting in their properties, and values have continued to go up. What would you like to see in the area? Some people talked about the desire for more green space in the area, maybe a splash pad or something like that. Better bicycle and pedestrian connections. That's come up over and over again. Mainly trying to find a way to tap into the trail. The Levy Trail, or that's just south of you, and connecting to that better came up repeatedly, but also just bikes getting around the area in general has come up is important. Better revitalization and beautification, parking and zoning enforcement. It has come up at a number of the comments that have been out there. Improving the rental inspection program and doing a better job of celebrating the cultural and diversity and history of this area. It's really got a rich history, but I think the consensus I'm hearing is we don't tell that story very well. Now, you do, obviously, and you've done some wonderful things. I had a chance to see your video the other day, which was really cool. So there has been some of that, but collectively we can do a better job of telling that story and getting the word out about the great culture and heritage of this area. So those are some of the things that we heard from the residents groups. There's more, but yeah, cover all of them. Yeah, Vicki, go ahead.
I was noticing, what would you like to see for West Des Moines, historic West Des Moines? And more revitalization and beautification, is that the reference to residents? I'm not seeing anything particularly that would express our concern, the concerns we express about residential area. So is that covered under revitalization and beautification?
Talking about the
Okay.
Shopping area, exactly. Yeah. Okay. We also had a breakfast with the foundation. We just called it essentially what it was, right? And had a great turnout. We did it at St. Kilda's in the back room back there. And it was great to get everybody together and kind of talk about some issues. Jason shared a little bit. We asked a few questions. This is just one of the quotes that came out of it, but need to maximize underused upper story space has come up over and over again. As the perception, at least, is that, I think reality too, is that some of the upper story space in the downtown area could be utilized better, whether it's for housing or additional office space or those kind of things. There's a lot of thoughts that a lot of that space is used just for storage and not much else. If you drive Fifth at night, most of those upper stories are dark, so that gives you an indication of how they're utilized or not utilized. So that was one of the things that came up. This is kind of a map, if you will, of a lot of the key things that we talked about during that meeting. There's a lot on this thing, but ideas like there's additional businesses that would be great for this area, right? Or ice cream shop would be awesome. Some additional eating opportunities, whether it's carry-out food or a butcher shop or deli or things like that, came up repeatedly as ideas that would be appropriate. The point that there's virtually no empty space on this corridor to locate no business came up, and that's certainly a significant issue and concern. And do we need to look at expanding the business area Fifth, further north or on Maple or on Fourth or Sixth or along Railroad, somewhere else to provide opportunities to accommodate the businesses that want to be here. Those kind of things came up in the discussion. So a lot of good things came up as an idea, but you know, lots of great ideas and comments came out of that conversation as well. Then we had our neighborhood workshop with Jason, and we heard his stories of redevelopment that they were doing in their community. Belmont, and I think that was a good session. This was just one of the comments from the discussion. You know, a really good conversation on how you preserve the history while embracing the future, right? So a lot of what he's done is for rehab of older buildings and put new uses after those things. I really enjoyed his comments on upper grade residential, right? He admitted straight up that from a financial perspective, his bankers said, yeah, it's not such a good idea. But he did it anyway because he thought it was important to attract those people to the area, and it really has played out for multiple benefits. So that may be a situation where some different financial things happen to make it happen. Positive. This is kind of a summary of some of them. We had table discussions afterwards and broke up into different groups, and you can get the copy of all this in detail later on. But some of the things that we heard from the conversation was more family-friendly business and entertainment options, right? So the ice cream shop idea, or maybe it's a splash pad, or things that they're available for families came out loud and clear and interest in the area. Co-working space, he showed some examples of that. That's maybe something we want to consider. Temporary pop-ups came up, again, utilizing upper story space. Those kind of things came up in the conversations after the presentation. We talked about character and need to look at the zoning regulations we have in this area, which we are certainly doing as a part of this process. The idea of maybe integrating more murals, even more public art. You have some, but I think there's certainly opportunities for more public art in the area. Again, the historic walking tours, doing different things to celebrate the history of this area came out loud and clear. The idea of a pedestrian bridge again came up in conversations. Street furnishings opportunities for people to sit and be in the area came up, and concern over loss of single family homes and tear downs was something that some of the residents all mentioned in that meeting. In terms of development types, people would like to see, there was certainly conversation about keeping the focus on Fifth, at least the southern part of Fifth, heavily retail, and maybe look at more service uses on Fourth and Sixth Street as opposed to more service businesses on Fifth. More housing opportunities, maybe on Railroad, probably not as much on Fifth as what I was hearing in most of the public comments that I've gotten so far. Keeping the housing that you've got necessarily, but not building more in that area. Looking at ways to better utilize the property that's on Railroad Avenue came up. Being sensitive to height issues absolutely came up loud and clear. And paying attention to shade. I remember being out there at Farmers Market one time and sweating my butt off. You know, right? Because there wasn't much shade out there. So that's a real issue that we need to be thinking about. Maybe we could do some things in some of those pedestrian walkthroughs or some other areas where we provide additional shade opportunities for people to get out of the heat sometimes. Information sharing and local support. We talked about the idea of a welcome packet. That's really something I would normally get into in this issue, but encourage neighborhood investment. It absolutely has come up in conversations and it's happening, but to continue to encourage that I think is appropriate. And property owners. One of the things, Vicki, you mentioned at our neighborhood meeting, which I thought was really good, was you were talking about the fact that there used to be meetings between the neighborhood association and the foundation, right? The foundation is more focused on business. You guys are more residents. Just get together and talk once in a while. And I mentioned it to Steve, he thought it was a great idea too. So that's probably something that we want to continue. So that kind of open communication, I think, is really important for this community to continue to thrive. And so things that we can do, things that came up out of that meeting. So those are some of the things that we heard at that initial workshop. Before I jump into talking about the character poll, anybody have feedback from the workshop that we had when Jason was here and talked about that? Is that helpful, useful, waste of time? I don't know. Thoughts? Yeah, Vicki?
Excuse me for my phone ringing, so I missed my opportunity to actually respond, but I'm not seeing anything on the list where we talk about code enforcement and maintenance of legal non-conforming use.
That's absolutely on
is-
the more detailed list. I didn't put it on the slide.
Okay.
I do remember talking about that and I have not forgotten. But thanks for bringing it up. That's good.
Thank you.
So I will assume the silence means that the workshop was good.
I thought it was. I enjoyed it. I learned some things and it was good.
All right, good. We have had a community character poll up on the website for a little while. We've taken it down now, but we got 132 responses, which is pretty good. And I want to kind of hit the highlights of what we heard. First of all, this one's just looking at some demographics, and I know the numbers are a little small.
I can't.
But the biggest group of people that responded were the 50 to 65 range, 35 to 50, next 65. So probably skewed a little bit older, perhaps. And we asked them, how often how are they familiar with the area? Top answer is they visit the area, but 25% of the people that responded to the poll actually live in this area. And another 13% work in the area. So, and some people that were actually from this area and some people that are not necessarily from this area, but come and visit the areas, the people that responded to the poll. In terms of what do you like most about the area? Top answer was local shops and restaurants and the quaint walkable character of the area, similar to what we'd heard earlier, but kind of reinforces some of the things that we've been hearing. Reflects local history and telling our story also was the third ranked one. In terms of what phrase best reflects the spirit and the vibe of the area, top answer, small town within a big town. Okay, we've heard that over and over again. The diversity of people and shops is very true for this area, right? You've got some very, very unique shops in this area, and you've got a pretty diverse group of people that live in this area. Curious, unique, and eclectic. Which it is, right? You've got a very interesting mix of shops as we're talking about. The richness of character and personality. Again, everything doesn't look the same. You've got unique buildings, unique architecture, unique character to this. What do you think contributes most to fostering the positive community character of the area? Vibrant mix of uses, shops and restaurants, number one. Historic character, and then community events and public gatherings, which obviously there's a lot of events that happen in this area, and that is certainly part of the character of the area. And people recognize that as important. What do you view as the biggest threats to the character of this area? Loss of history, number one, right? We move lectures or we deal with those things. How we replace it and transform it certainly is important. So we want to make sure that we don't lose the history and unique character of this area. Incompatible architectural designs. I think we all know what that was probably referring to. Not attracting new businesses, residents, and users. That one seems odd to me a little bit. So coming back, over 5 years, there's a lot of new businesses that have come over the last few years. And so it has been some turnover, which you would expect in a healthy district. And obviously some new residents of the area as well, but that's what people said. So I respect that. Not accommodating change in property maintenance. So some of the concerns that we were hearing, and those are some of the top concerns that people listed in terms of the character or that could possibly impact the character of this area. These are just some open-ended comments. I'm not going to read all of them, but you've got them in your packet. Kelly Junction's history of a railroad town is phased away. That is something that I have heard, and I see Nan shaking her head. So that is a concern that is shared by a number of people. People are concerned about the number of offices that are taking up some of the retail and dining space. I've heard that in a couple of cases. Stark exterior mass size of new apartment buildings detract from the older original buildings. That's probably why I'm here. It's those kind of comments are things that have been made over and over to me. So I'm big picture themes to kind of take out of all this stuff that we got to celebrate our history better. We got to really pay attention to the architecture, both the exterior appearance of the building and the scale of structures. When we have new development in the area, that's what design and zoning guidelines are all about. We do need to think about building maintenance and making sure that we're paying attention to that, both in terms of earlier and making sure that we have the ability to do that, whether it's as simple as sharing ideas of how to maintain your property and those kind of things, or other programs. We got to pay attention to the second floor a little bit better. Appearance of vacancy in commercial areas and office uses moving into retail spaces. That we'll talk about, but probably less concerned about that. We want to not neglect just the residential areas around this, right? It's not, this study is really a much bigger service area. We spent probably a lot more time talking about Fifth and the area around that business district, but this study is looking at the entire area. And we don't want to lose sight of the importance of those neighborhoods on the whole. Foster a starter home neighborhood, just kind of is, right? And I think we want to keep it that way, right? So what do we need to do to continue to do those kind of things? Zoning enforcement adjustment, we talked about that. Balance between parking and sense of place, right? This is kind of one of my things that I always come back to. Honestly, you don't want too much parking. There's such a thing as too much parking. If you got too much parking, you have these fields of areas, and you're not capitalizing on the value of the area, and it loses some of that walkability if you got to walk through this big parking lot that's half vacant. Now, if you need the parking, you need the parking, and we got to make sure there's sufficient parking, but we don't want too much parking. So it's a balancing it, really. Newcomers should feel welcome and included. Sounds obvious, but there are things that we can do to kind of promote that. Enhance the community diversity and safety. I think part of that celebration. I've looked at some of the crime things. You had one of the neighborhood had somebody actually providing you a report. I don't think crime is particularly a major problem right now. I don't think it's really bad, but we want to make sure it doesn't become one, right? So being cognizant of that is really important. And that balance between preserving older buildings and welcoming appropriate new development is always kind of a challenge. And how do we address that, and how do we roll that into the overall project? So those are some of the things. I think that was, yeah. So those are kind of some of our key takeaways. Are there any big picture things that I didn't talk about that we want to make sure that we're including in this study? Question.
Mike, I've got just a very small comment, but when we say foster the starter home neighborhood, I totally understand what you mean, but I've also heard that there's a lot of retirees who want to downsize and come to the community as well. So you kind of have two different demographics.
That's a good point.
Like this housing stock.
Yeah. Great point.
Mhm. Yep.
All right, so that's kind of what we've heard. Obviously, continue to encourage your friends, neighbors, and everybody to go to the website periodically to see what's going on. And if they subscribe, they're going to get updates every time we update something. So the more people that do that, the better. We're going to make sure we're communicating well what is happening in this planning process. So again, I would encourage you guys to do that. Neighborhood meetings and interviews.
What's the URL on that?
That's just, that shouldn't be on there. It should have been taken out because we just covered that stuff, all right? Okay, so now what I'm talking about here is we also did some one-on-one interviews with some key people, businesses, property owners, residents, and that kind of thing. And this is just a kind of a summary of some of the things that we heard. I'm not going to take time right now to go through all those because it's relatively similar to the stuff we've talked about, but they're in your packet, so you got documentation of the points that all of the things. But we were able to get into some pretty detailed comments, discussions on those areas, and so I think it was good and insightful. Again, I got things like provide more shade. Overall, not a parking problem, but at certain times in certain locations there are some parking concerns. Those kind of things did come up in the discussions with residents. You know, not happy with the new apartments. So no surprise there, right? But there's some concerns. But then again, trying to provide those bike connections, need to preserve as much as possible with design standards and doing better, just with all things we've already talked about, right? So there's not really a reason to go through that kind of stuff. So what I'd like to do now is kind of talk about some other examples I've seen in Iowa and the Midwest that I think, from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing so far, might have some applicability to this area, okay? And some of them may make sense, some of them don't. And this is where I would like you guys just to chime in anytime you see something that think that's a great idea, or that's a horrible idea, or just feel free to chime in the conversation, right? First example is Batavia, Illinois. So the Fox River, it's about 45 minutes, maybe an hour west of the city of Chicago. It's got a nice little downtown right adjacent to the river. They took one of their streets downtown, maybe what they call the Dutch term, but basically it's taking a street and you remove the curbs and you look at the street is really designed for pedestrians, bikes, and cars, right? So all three are designed to use the same space. And at various times, they absolutely do close the street off for events and activities and those kind of things. But one, it's beautiful. Two, it really enhances the character of this area and really is well designed for public accessibility, right? You don't have the curbs, you don't have to have the ramps in association with the curbs and those kind of things. This is actually something that we did throw the idea of maybe doing this on Maple Street or some other spot in the downtown area in the previous plan. I still think, from my perspective, it's something worth considering because we don't have, you know, some downtowns have a nice big park in the middle of their downtown or something. We don't have that space. And you've got the area just at the south end where you do have your events and that kind of stuff. But even that, maybe you think about enhancing or something like that. So I think it's a valid concept and idea. In each one of these, there's a link that you can read an article or something about it if you want to learn more information. But I thought it was an interesting idea to think about in the area.
Well, there's obviously no parking on the streets, right?
Actually, there is actually. You can park on the
Right.
street. Yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay. Oh, I see. Oh, no, okay.
Yeah.
Way down there, okay.
Yeah, there's some spots that are no parking. This one-
Yeah, okay,
no
yeah,
parking,
with the
but other
planters.
spots down the street, you can park. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm,
So,
Nice.
kind of gives a nice character and feel to the area that's a little bit different. This is also in Batavia, where they've come in with some little pop-up shops, right? These are great for new entrepreneurs that maybe can't afford a space on Fifth today, but maybe can in a couple of years once they establish a foothold and do some retail things, right? So maybe there's some locations where we can do something like this. I've also seen this done just in an empty storefront, so it doesn't have to be a separate building or shed. And these can be of all kinds of, these are pretty involved, nice looking ones. They actually worked with high school shop class and built some of these things in that way and got the community involved in building these. But they've been very successful. They've led to a couple of businesses that started here and have moved to another storefront in the downtown area. And so that's been pretty positive for the community. So that's something we could consider here. Honestly, when we did our parking survey, there were a couple of spots that are a little bit tight. There are lots of other areas where we have really more than enough parking. So maybe we could do some of this in a parking lot on a temporary basis and lease. And you know, in 15 years, if we needed that parking, we could take these things back out, right? So I think that would give you some flexibility, providing a mechanism to promote new entrepreneurs, new businesses moving into the area. Murals. I'm a mural fan personally. They are a great way of doing a lot of things. They can be just beautiful public art. They can be a way to tell your story of the community. This happens to be one in Dubuque that was telling the story of the automotive history of this particular area of the community. Okay. And it also at the same time is telling the story of the folks that worked in the area and that kind of thing. We talked earlier about needing to tell a story better, right? And I think you've got some blank walls where we could do that with. Doesn't have to be that, but that's one way that we could do it. You've got particularly those, every time I walk through one of those pedestrian ways that you've got between the parking lot, I think, mural. I know they just repainted the one for the veterans and that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I think there's lots of other opportunities to do that kind of thing. in the area. And I would strongly encourage you guys thinking about that is something we want to maybe include in the
I love
plan.
that.
And they can be great ways to pull the community together too. I mean, you can have an artist design it and have a group of kids actually paint it, you know, those kind of things. So to get more people involved in the area, I think are great.
I like the idea of murals as well. When you go downtown, you see that they have beautiful pop-up murals that really tell history about certain things. And there's lots of history in this area that could be depicted through the pictures and whatnot through artists. So a way of keeping history and preserving it on a wall that everybody can see when they walk past it is nice.
Yeah, and I've seen some really cool ones too. Everybody is into like Instagrammable spots, right? Some spot where you want to take your picture in front of, right? And we'll come to that in a little bit earlier, but I've seen some murals that basically just had some artwork and had a cutout for you to stand in that spot to take your picture against it. There's all kinds of cool things we can do with murals, but I do think it's a great way to tell your story and to do some interesting things. Yes, there's some maintenance involved in those things and keep them up, and you do have to repaint occasionally and do some other maintenance. It's not a one and done thing, but I think they can really add some life and vibrancy.
I've been going to Dubuque probably the last 6 or 7 years. You know, we'll go around fall time, you know, and I've noticed that there's more and more murals there in Dubuque. And what they do, what I kind of noticed about the murals is that they really almost they brought a lot of life to some areas, some old areas that were really run down. And the murals have kind of stoked some interest in cleaning up the properties and stuff too, because it's just a really cool feeling when you start seeing those and properties around them start improving. So I've taken a bunch of pictures. I've got a bunch of pictures of murals. I just did that one day and it's really interesting.
It's all kinds of cool stuff, right? I mean, Dubuque's a great example. There's a town south of Chicago called Homewood. I don't have any pictures in this presentation, but they did what they call Trump Low, which maybe I'm not even pronouncing it right. It's a French term, but anyway, they make it look like very three-dimensional and real, even though it's not, right? So they paint windows on the wall and window boxes and all that kind of stuff. And from a distance, you think it's real. It's not when you get up close, but it's just kind of, there's all kinds of, my point is, I guess, there's all kinds of fun things and cool things you can do with murals that really kind of life in a space. This isn't a walkable environment where you can take advantage of that, and you don't have to have something you can recognize in 2 seconds. It's a walking scale. So I think that would be really fun for this area. We talked on a call the other day with staff, and this was a great idea, about integrating some things, maybe not in the core of Fifth, but maybe, you know, we've got the industrial area generally around I'm sorry, Vicki, what's the name of the center where you guys meet?
Eddie Davis.
Eddie Davis, yes. That area over there has got some industrial buildings in that area, or maybe the area south of the railroad, where we look to create kind of what is commonly called in the planning world these days, maker spaces, right? Somewhere where you can go and build stuff. You've got some woodworking tools and those kind of things. You got some studio space for artists, those kind of things, where it's just, and this is an example from Dubuque again, of their Key City Creative Center. This is a little bit north of the downtown. It's not in the downtown, but it's not far from the downtown. And they're really doing some cool stuff. It's kind of a membership thing. You can actually reserve your own little studio space, and if you want to in there, or you can just use the collective space if you want to, and it is a membership thing. But it is a great kind of hub of creative activity in the area. You know, you can do something like this to develop the artwork for downtown or whatever you wanted to do. But it is a great kind of way to continue to support creativity in the community and do something interesting with an older space that maybe has been vacant or something like that for a while. So those kind of ideas are kind of fun and interesting and something to think about. Okay. Now let's look at some housing opportunities, okay? You may like some of these, you may hate some of these, but we need to talk about it, okay? This is an example I saw just the other week. This is up in Cedar Falls. It is actually on a road that's not that dissimilar from Railroad. The other side of this is the river in that area, so it's kind of a one-sided street. But they developed a 3-story building here that is mixed use. You've got some commercial activities happening on the ground floor here. There's a restaurant on this end. There's a hair studio, I think. It actually expanded alley, which is interesting. I've not seen that before, but I thought it was interesting. And you've got some parking on the ground level here, and there's actually some parking in the back of that building. These are market rate units. I mean, $100 to $1,600 rent, so they're not necessarily, but it was right adjacent in the heart of the downtown, but it was right adjacent to the downtown, very walkable to the downtown, a block away, which is something that we might want to consider along the railroad. Other residential examples, these also been involved, the inspections again. Mixed use buildings. This particular building here was about 10,000 square feet of retail, 10,000 square feet of office, kind of on the second story there. And then you had some studio and one bedroom apartments on the top floor. They had just kind of surface parking in there. This particular building. Obviously, other buildings in the area that did have some apartments. This one's 4 stories. Is that too tall here? Maybe. This was some of their newer commercials design and correction that was done in the downtown area. This was obviously a bank, but had office space on the second floor there. But the one thing I did like was they did pay attention to the corner, right? It is a little bit different on the corner. It's got a corner entrance that I thought was interesting. They'll also do some directional signage in this area. I don't think there's works personally, so I'm not highlighting that, but it is something we want to think about. This is too small. You can't, I mean, particularly driving, you can't read it, so it doesn't really work. The idea of that wayfinding sign is important to the area. And then the other thing that they did, which is interesting in Cedar Falls, and I don't know that we wanted to do it here, but we talked about an interest in some additional opportunities for outdoor dining. There's really not a lot along Fifth right now. Yes, we are trying to allow some outdoor dining in some of the pedestrian walkways now, and that's a good thing, I think. What are other ways other communities have done it? Necessarily, but if you go to Cedar Falls, it's kind of an interesting thing where they've taken the street and they kind of weave it through the downtown area where it's pretty close on one side and they have parking on the other side. And when they do that, they've got space for outdoor dining and other activities along the street. If you did that, you're probably going to lose half the parking you got on Fifth. Okay, that's the downside of it. You gain the more pedestrian other space, but you lose the parking. So my guess is that's not going to fly here. but my job is to kind of show you what other communities are doing and that kind of thing. So I'm tossing that out as a way that it could be considered if that was something you wanted to look at. And it does provide opportunities for some of these are art, some of these are that kind of thing, but it does provide some opportunities for that as well. This area does work. I mean,
with that, I was in Cedar Falls this summer and was in this exact same area. And when I drove through there, I thought about, because we did talk about this in the original master plan.
Yep.
And I thought that, yeah, it looks cool, but it's not really functional. I mean, you get a handful of parking spots and then you've got nothing.
Yeah.
So you're truly forcing people way off to then try to come back to them. And I mean, there were quite a few empty spots down there when I was in the area this summer.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's probably part of it because how's your business going to succeed if you've got to walk 2 blocks to get to it? So.
I didn't see a boatload of vacancies in this area, but I completely get that people do like the convenient parking and you definitely do lose that if you go with a concept like this. I've not seen this done in many places, so that kind of feels open, honestly. But it is an option to think.
In those larger spaces, do they have outdoor dining?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, this is just one little shot. And when I was there, most of the outdoor dining was done for the season. So I don't have pictures of that. But absolutely, I was talking to the planning director and some of these little bump outs do have outdoor seating and those kind of opportunities, which does add life and character to the street. So that's certainly a plus.
It's like going to Europe, right? Your outdoor cafes, your vibrancy in the streets, it's so special. when you go to Europe and all the character and the spilling out in the streets and dining on the streets. It's beautiful. It's fun.
I'm guessing the public works guy wasn't real excited about this when they first did it.
Yeah.
But, you know, obviously it's been there for quite a while now and he's obviously had to learn to deal with it.
Sit down.
Our engineers even have a French curve or they just have triangles that you.
Yeah. And they got a hotel in downtown.
Yeah.
I think is cool. And we talked about an interest in a boutique hotel or at least some Airbnbs or B&Bs or something in this area. Honestly, I would love one. I don't really like to have to stay out west Des Moines. I'd rather stay in this area when I'm in town, but if there's nowhere to stay right now, right? So I think that would be something we would think about and encourage and try to find a way to make happen in this area.
They did something, a neat project like this downtown Des Moines with the Surety Hotel. They took an old historic building that had co-working space in it and they turned it into a beautiful hotel, small boutique with a Mulberry Tavern is on the main floor. And it's just a really nice spot to gather with your friends, your family. And it's a special place. So they took a historic building and refabbed it for a hotel. It's a beautiful spot. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add, this was a huge opportunity. I just had my family over for Thanksgiving. And I was trying to find hotels for them near me here. There's nothing. And I gave them the West Des Moines, the Jordan Creek Parkway and all those hotels. My dad calls me, he's like, how can I stay in a hotel that's not in like a Menards parking lot? They went downtown, you know, like nothing around here. If you open a hotel here, you will make money.
Yes. If it's tastefully done.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the email address. Find out. All right, call the if I need to, but
It's actually got two buildings. There's a smaller kind of a 1950s era motel behind it that's part of the same property, but two separate buildings.
I can tell you, no, actually, I think I got one and I got another example. But you know, they have a black program, the history. And
Yes, I love that. I love that.
That's amazing.
Definitely need a lot of that.
And people think a lot of times about kind of the bronze plaques, which is really expensive. This is cheaper, you know, and I think you need a consistent look and consistent design of these things, but it's done in a way that doesn't break the bank, I guess, so to speak. So I thought this was. Absolutely.
This is what we wanted to do, something like this on the new restroom they're building, maybe limestone or whatever, but have some details about our history on that restroom. And they poo-pooed that and said, well, the art commission probably doesn't have the money for it, but yet they're putting up all these sculptures all over. So just a thought that would be wonderful for Valley Junction.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Retelling again.
All right, this is Frankfort, Illinois. It's about 45 minutes south of Chicago. This is newer commercial construction, kind of designed to look old, honestly.
It does.
Restaurant in the corner, again, pay attention to that. Very green, as you can see, with the landscape and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I thought maybe an example to think about. Obviously, they paid attention to the streets and pedestrian crossings and that kind of stuff, which I think is pretty nice. Actually put, you can't see because it's got a tree in front of it, but it says, you know, built in probably 2005 or something like that. But they put the old sign that you would typically see with the building there. This is cool because this is right downtown, and you've got this beautiful event space. You can actually, this is adjacent to it, right? So all the restaurants actually look out on this. You can go out there and have a drink or whatever you want to do and stay there and listen to the concert if you want to, or come over here to the park and listen to the concert. But it works out really well. Now, I don't know where we'd get a green space in this area that big, unless we blow out a parking lot or something. But it's something to think about if we can create some greener space in the area to do some things.
Jamie Hurd Amphitheater Part 2.
That,
Jamie Hurd Amphitheater Part 2.
yeah, exactly.
Doesn't know.
No, I don't. Electric charging station anywhere around here. Is there?
Cool.
Nope.
I think you should have one.
Yeah,
Or two,
For
or
sure.
3 or 5 or whatever, but
driverless anyways.
you know, people are coming here and to shop and let them charge their car and go shop. You
I
know,
love that.
dine or whatever, right?
I agree.
We discussions with Tesla about doing something like that.
Absolutely. It seems like a great area. This is right in downtown Frankfurt, so it's right in the downtown area.
Love
did that there. Cape Girardeau, Missouri. One of the things that was really cool is had a wall of just different phones and iPads and all that kind of stuff. So the coding folks could play around and test their app on 12 different devices, right? But just kind of some space that is a shared, this is in an old historic building in Cape Girardeau that they retrofitted this whole space. And it's just really neat and it looks really well in their downtown area. And I know you guys had something for a while on the old fire station and for various reasons it didn't work. But I wouldn't throw the idea out completely because I still think it's an interesting element to have in your downtown area and something to think about. I know this one works.
On Des Moines, they have artist studios in Mainframe Studio. So they've retrofitted an old building. They took an old building and they have now many artist studios within the building and they make it an event space over the weekends for events and artist expeditions and things. It's really cool.
Wasn't Phoenix Elementary supposed to be that?
What's that?
Wasn't Phoenix Elementary School supposed to be that? And I hear nothing about it anymore.
I toured Phoenix last week and I asked about that. I said, well, you have artists, you know, did they ever do any kind of cooperative open house? And they said, really, since this is not just their workspace, but it's their resident.
They live there.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
They would all, everybody who lives there would have to be in favor of doing something like that. And they're not all,
They live there.
they're not all 2 and 3 dimensional artists. Some of them are music composers, some of them are videographers. So,
Diversity and.
yeah. CHI said they'd be great, but they'd have to be the ones to decide to do that.
Good information to have.
Yeah.
Well, there's the gym that's still there. I don't know what use
Is it
that's
still a
been
gym?
put to.
And they said that it would need about $750,000 in upgrades to make it ADA compliant and other things. And maybe even more of an issue than that, it would need to be rezoned for any kind of commercial use, which is probably unlikely, so.
Other things to kind of enhance a bit, right? These two are actually this is actually a new development. It's not, it's kind of one of these more modern mixed use areas. It's got a big hotel and a bunch of office space around it and some shops and cinemas and that kind of thing. But some of the elements that they're incorporating into this, I think we might want to think about here, right? So even something as simple as a playground that's convenient to the area to give the break from dining or shopping or whatever they're doing. Again, those kind of Instagrammable spots, right? Obviously, this is Cleveland area, so they say Cleveland, but it could be VJ or Valley Junction or whatever you wanted to do. But things that people take a picture of, post to Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and it just kind of reminds people of this cool area called Valley Junction or historic West Des Moines that they might want to go visit later on, right? So we need to be always thinking about those opportunities and doing things that are memorable for people, whatever fashion or form that might take.
We're again with the Phoenix School, we did, the neighborhood association fought like crazy to keep that playground there. And then we've got not Holiday Park, that's a little farther away, but the Legion Park.
Legion Park and Olin Park.
So
Yeah.
you have two, they're just not.
This is near my office in Lakeville, actually. You have some little kiosks right now, but they're not substantial, right? I mean, a bigger map, bolder. Yes, I think you need to design it so that you can change it out because you got tenants and businesses that change out on a regular basis. So you need to be able to think that through, but a clearer map to help people navigate around, particularly for businesses that are not directly on Fifth, right? To direct them to locations on Maple or on 6th or whatever it is. I think it's a good idea. This is actually piece of public art. And in the middle of that changes colors. They can program it to be green and red at Christmas time and whatever, at different seasons. But I thought that was kind of interesting. This is actually a newer construction building. Again, they tried to pay attention to the front facade and character of that area. This building over here, which you can't really see that well in that picture, was actually an old train roundabout. They take the trains in there, turn them around and send them back. Trolley barn, they called it, right? It's been rehabbed into a cool restaurant and banquet space and that kind of thing, but kind of fits in reasonably well, I think, to the area. Old fire station that was turned into a restaurant. Your station got turned into something else now, but that idea I think is kind of cool. This is an old house that you can see the historic character and structure here. They added on this front part for dining, but maybe there's some areas along Fifth where we can look at some opportunities to do that and convert some of those existing structures to dining. Maybe you don't want to do that, but worth discussing anyway. This is right block from my office. It is actually really an Airbnb. They don't really do breakfast. They really just do lodging. It's only got 4 units in it. It's not a very big thing, but it's full like almost 100% of the time. So much so that this guy bought 3 other houses in the area to do the same thing because they didn't have enough space. And they're building a kind of boutique hotel on the north side of downtown because they found that people like to be able to go hang out in the restaurants and bars and then drive home that night, or they've got family and friends that want to be in the area and they're having an event in this area and want them to be able to stay close to their homes. Those kind of things most of your homes right now in this area aren't that large, so you really couldn't get, it'd be challenging to do it being most of them because they're too small in terms of the unit count. But if you can find the right one, it'd be cool.
Yeah, my sister lives in Plainfield and they have beautiful little places to go after work and in the evenings, and just their downtown area is just so quaint and neat. So it's really a wonderful, beautiful area.
Yeah, it's really transformed. I mean, I've been living in that area for 20 years. It wasn't that great 20 years ago, but
they've done a lot of things to it.
Yeah. They got, it was a state route. And they had to get there was all kinds of truck traffic on this main route, right? They got the truck traffic relocated out of the area, redid the state route, did that. They could widen the sidewalks and make it more pedestrian friendly. And honestly, it was tough on those businesses for the year or so they were doing that construction because it was a mess. But once it was done, it's beautiful. And this place is just hopping in nights and evenings now. So it does work. This one is an old bank that was converted into boutique hotel, very upscale. This is in Homewood, Illinois, south of Chicago, right on the transit line. I think this has got in the vicinity of 15 to 20 units, so it's not real big. And it's pretty pricey if you go on. Actually, it wasn't too bad. It depends on the time and whatever, but it's kind of a luxury little hotel in the downtown area. And their downtown, honestly, is not as nice as yours, but it's still doing pretty well and it's been successful. So I guess the point is, I think there's a good potential for it here to do something like that.
Mike,
Yeah,
I've heard a lot of people talk about some type of boutique hotel, something like that.
I have. Yeah,
And I guess there's always a question of where is break-even point in terms of enough units to make it feasible, and not so many that, you couldn't do it anywhere.
right. And I don't know. It depends on the operator and all those kind of things, right? And it depends on what you got associated with. If you've got, a restaurant and some meeting space and whatever to help supplement that, that has an impact on it too. I'll do a little digging and see if I can find some magic parameters, but the ones that I have looked at most recently were in the range of 20 to 30 units.
Okay, because I know Hotel Petit up in Perry has gone through numerous ownerships, and people trying to make it a go. It has a bar, it's got a conference center, it's got a small bowling alley in it, but it ended up, the city ended up buying it just to keep it open.
It has a restaurant too.
Yeah. this is Libertyville, Illinois, another somewhat famous main street in the Chicagoland area. This is some of their newer construction that you can see here. It's got, ground floor commercial space and restaurants, apartments above. Honestly, not the greatest architecture in the world, but an example. This was actually kind of interesting. It is also in Libertyville. This is an area that what's the name of the street? It's not really. Anyway, covered up by the presenting thing, but nonetheless, it is a street that they created some new housing on adjacent to the downtown area, sold like you wouldn't believe. And all single family homes, pretty smaller, much smaller lots than you typically have in the area. Not huge homes. I think these are in the range of 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, which maybe sounds big to you, but the price point on these things are nuts, like $1 million, right? But they were like 600 to 700 to 800 when they were built about, 8 years ago, but they really appreciated dramatically. But the point is, there might be some spots in and around the area, obviously not on Fifth necessarily, but in the periphery of it, maybe on Fourth or Sixth, where we can look at some opportunities to do some housing like that and supplement the area. You can see it's pushed up to the street. In terms of character, all of them have something that faces the street, whether it's a porch or some kind of an element to it.
Like garage and back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. But it absolutely worked in this location.
In order to do this, we
Wow.
have to change the zoning for setbacks and stuff.
We would.
Mhm. Yeah.
You might want to do it as a plan development and just do that block or something rather than doing it for the whole area, but it absolutely some zoning modifications to do something like that. Pedestrian alleyways. We heard comments earlier about providing shade. Maybe that's something we think about. You're doing now, allowing some dining in these areas, but I think there's a lot of more creative things we can do with some of your pedestrian ways, or at least think about it. So here's an example from Lake Bluff, Illinois, where they put an arbor in, and you can still obviously connect through here, but doing things to add and enhance the character of those areas. And you're starting to do that with some public art and some other things. But I guess my point is, other things I think we can think about. We talked about the murals, other things like that. Lighting basis.
Hey, Mike, back to the Libertyville example, that's a school street, by the way.
School Street, that's it. Yes.
School Street. Would that is more. Do those come with accessory units above garages? Back alleyway, is that,
I didn't hear, but certainly in some places they did.
is that something that you're seeing occurring in?
I'm seeing it in California and reading about it in that place. I have not seen it a lot around Chicago and in the Midwest, to say. But it's certainly something that is happening. Evanston, it's happening not so much with new construction. Decided to allow it. Evanston's where our main Tesco office is, north of Chicago. And they created a whole new accessory dwelling unit guided book, and they're really promoting it. So it is happening there. Absolutely. Okay. So that was it for my other examples of other places around the Midwest that I've seen that I think got some relevance to the area. The stuff that I showed you, any of them, we talked about the murals being a great idea for sure. Any of the other ones that I showed you, or you really loved or you really hated?
Boutique hotel.
Like the idea of a hotel?
We've heard that from multiple people, whether it's, people being down the junction or visiting, that how great would it be to have an experience where you can stay down there, you can visit, or even if you're entertaining, a new CEO of your company and like, hey, welcome to West Des Moines. Here's our small town feel in a big city. So I think that'd be a great asset down there.
I've heard lots of people say more apartments south of the railroad. Okay. One place where we might be able to do that. There's not a lot of places. I want to kind of look at that area. And the other thing that I've heard over and over again is we've got to do a better job of tapping into that awesome bike trail that we got down there and get those people into Valley Junction. How do we do that? Lots of people have talked about building a pedestrian bike bridge across the railroad and the street. I got to tell you, maybe, but it would not be an easy thing. One, it's a pretty long stretch with the railroad and street. Maybe we can overcome that, but we've also got those high tension wires that are there. That would either have to be put underground or something, which would be crazy expensive. I was just looking at a new pedestrian overpass in another community, and the price tag on it was like $5 million.
Wow.
And it didn't have to go as high as you'd have to go here because of those high tension lines, or bury those tension lines, which is also extremely expensive if you put them in a vault. So, well, I'm not ruling the idea out. I am telling you that, you know, you also need to think about opportunity cost, right? If it's going to cost us $5 million for that, what else could we do for that $5 million? So that all it does, David.
And I would add, I'm not sure it would be used that much. You know,
I was paying attention when I drove in today. You go through Des Moines, there's all these pedestrian crossings over time. Out of 3 bridges that I noticed, I saw one person. And people would use it at certain times for sure, but they don't.
It's kind of cold outside today.
Bikers will just use the street anyway, right? I mean, so I don't know. It's a high price tag, and if you guys want to continue to pursue it, we can continue to pursue it. When we did this last time, we showed some concepts and ideas of doing it and kind of focused more on the concept, which is approved now. And that's what I wanted to show you now before we go too far with that. So we've been working with the railroad.
As a biker, I do want to say, there is a big gap from, right as you get on railroad from EP True, and you, as a biker, you don't want to go on the road because it's way too dangerous. You'll absolutely not. And we always take the sidewalk, and it's absolutely terrible. It's not bike friendly. So, so that would be huge, because then the next bike entrance is right there on 63rd, which is a huge entrance to the rest of Des Moines, and all of the trails open up there. So there is a huge bike gap for bikers in that area. You could go south of railroad, but a lot of people don't want to.
Great point. Great point. So what is planned right now is to basically come off the trail in 11th, go kind of behind those storage units that have been built along the tracks there, and then come up 9th essentially, and then jog over to 8th. They have got approval from the railroads, which is murderously hard to do, for at-grade crossings in these areas, but the railroad actually has to build that at-grade crossing, and they've kind of been not moving too fast. So, but this connection will happen hopefully next year. So there is that. Obviously, you still have an issue there where right now this is designed, and there is a path along 8th right now. It's actually a big box culvert, really is what it is, but you can ride on top of that. So you would come up to 8th, and then right now you would ride on street on Maple to get to the downtown area. Is that the only solution? I don't know, maybe not, but that is happening at least. So there would be that. And as you said, there is the connection down at 63rd. Do we need to look at other opportunities along? I mean, I've heard people say to me that traffic on Railroad Avenue is just too darn fast, and they worry about getting in and out of that area. Maybe look at Railroad Avenue and think about road diets and other things where we can maybe slow that traffic down a little bit. Maybe we can then provide some better bike lanes along that area that would then provide that connection and that tie-in better. I think that's something we could think about if you want us to pursue that. So I think there's opportunities like that. I did want you to know at least what is being planned and hopefully constructed here in the near future. And I did want to also talk about development opportunities south of Railroad Avenue. You've essentially got that piece right there. It's about 7 acres. It is zoned business park, and it's owned by a company that does storage units. I would hate to see storage units on that site personally, because I think it's got so much more opportunity for that. Kevin, go ahead.
What about all the area, east of there down by,
On the wrong side of the levee.
It's all
No.
floodplain.
down here? On the wrong side of the levee. The levee's cleared out of the river. I'm talking about along Lincoln, between Lincoln and,
There's not anything left there because they got that huge detention basin on the south side of Lincoln. Then if further to the west, well, or east, it narrows up.
I thought Knapp has all that property down on.
That's the only piece that's left over there.
Okay, but he's saying that this is all we've got. That's what I'm saying. It's not all we've got.
That's within our study area. And that piece isn't.
And expand the study area.
Just storage.
We can do that.
We could.
If we develop it.
And we need to if we're truly talking about what else can happen down there.
Okay.
I mean, this got sectioned off, Clyde, by you, just so we could get the foundry in there. So originally it didn't come south of railroad. So we've already come south of railroad. Let's go east.
No, it's easy enough to include
Yeah,
that.
that's fine. We can do that. No problem. But anyway,
But question, Mike, I guess, you know, and Catherine kind of brought it up too. I mean, you've got a trail basically over by Hy-Vee and over by the park, and then the sidewalk kind of narrows down. I mean, what is the opportunities? I mean, quite frankly, if I was a bike rider and I wanted to get to Fifth Street, I'm not gonna go up to Maple and come across.
right.
You know, I mean, Maple's got quite a bit of traffic on it and you got people parking on it.
They chose that location.
And I mean, what is the ability to
I'm just curious.
widen out that sidewalk to make it more of a trail, if not a full trail, at least something more than what we, 4 foot.
I don't know if the reason
Yep.
behind it or.
Bill, possibly, we can look at that. It came up in discussions, in one of the neighborhood groups, actually. We've got what they call sharrows, right? There's these little arrows on the road that are supposed to indicate that that road is supposed to be shared between bikes and cars. Doesn't seem to work that well here. Maybe it's an educational campaign that we need to do or something. I don't know, but it's not working correctly now, I guess is what I've heard. So if we can do a trail, better trail connection through there, we can do something to enhance that. I think it's a great point.
But you're talking a lot of money if you're going from Railroad and Grand all the way down here. You're talking dollars to make that happen. And again, what's the return on investment?
I guess I know that when you get over around 7th and stuff, you got some buildings closer up to the street. But, you know, and maybe where like the Baptist Mission used to be and stuff there, that's narrower there, but, you know, is there really,
Developed that way, you got straight access.
you know, having something a little wider there?
Well, and I honestly think that some of those structures, being, 6th and 8th there, are probably redevelopment opportunities long-term, right? So when that happens, maybe that's your opportunity to.
Is there a reason we can't go under the road? Like I live on the other side of West Des Moines and we have a lot of trails that go under the road.
Westridge Elementary has that too, from the school underneath EP True.
Got it just east of Valley West.
Yeah, I mean, generally.
Got it
that's-
just west of 19th.
Yeah, I think you may have some issues with like groundwater table in that area.
You're also gonna have issues with the railroad on the south side, getting it connected.
That would be the other issue.
Generally, underground's more expensive than over. And you get the drainage
But
problems.
again, you're talking millions.
When you,
Where's your return on investment?
when you come out of the ground on the north side, where are you gonna be? Because you need a large area.
You got it, right.
Oh, yeah, good night.
Just talking, why did they choose the 8th Street point? Why didn't they take it down and cross at Fifth? Because you gotta cross the train tracks twice there.
There's a signal at 8th, right?
Yes.
So that's.
They're using the signal, that's.
Yep.
Yes.
It.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Could we do a hawk signal?
Like something where you hit a button and flash.
Like in Beaverdale, yeah.
I got one by the Arts Center.
Is red only when somebody wants to cross?
Yeah.
Sure do that.
But if you were to do something like that and then you were to develop that area, you'd have a.
And honestly, yeah, because if you develop that area and like Kevin said, if you go east of there, you're probably gonna want a pedestrian bridge anyway,
Some kind of flashing light.
or some type of way to get traffic over there, because I've changed the marquee sign a couple times over on Railroad, and it's like a game of Frogger trying to get across Railroad.
Well, and to that point, we've got one that just went in at 39th and EP True, and that's a heavily traveled road. And the Hawk Beacon up there, and for those not familiar with it, what it is, it's a light that is, it's just blank until somebody hits
Mhm.
crosswalk, starts flashing yellow to let you know it's gonna change, and it turns red. You go across and then change it.
I like
Lights turn off and there you go.
You guys just installed it. It's terrific.
Mhm.
It's right by my house.
Hey,
I love it. It works
Yeah.
great, Kevin.
Over near St. Francis Church and then one on 50th, and we're just doing one over by the library.
It's wonderful.
No, no,
I would, yeah. You should do more of those.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think it's a great idea.
yeah.
I'd dump you right into Fifth Street if you do that.
Hmm.
All right. But when we do the visual preference survey, when we think about that, the whole area is not the same, right? The historic district, and that's got one character. You get farther north on Fifth, you probably got a different character, certainly the residential character. Potentially the stuff along the railroad has got a different character. The industrial area a little bit farther to the west has got a different character. So we're going to have to define some zone for this thing, and we're going to be breaking up the visual preference survey into kind of these bigger picture areas, because what fits along railroad may not be the same at the north end of Fifth and that kind of thing, right? So just want everybody to be aware, you guys probably are, but the official registered district is generally along Fifth, although it does jog at a couple places that you can see here. It really only goes up about 2 blocks. So that's the kind of the official historic district of the area, well documented, well registered. This is the zoning for the area. You've got a number of different categories. Essentially, the redder categories. Obviously, most of the property along Fifth is Valley Junction Historic Business District. You've got Valley Junction Commercial. Corners here, the yellow is residential. Single family Valley Junction residential. And then VP is Business Park zoning south of Railroad in that area. The Valley Junction Historic Business does go all the way up to Vine right now. I'm really thinking we're gonna maybe look at some different character for this northern part of this thing, because it's really not the same character. So at least in terms of the design guidelines, well, in terms of the zoning things, we're gonna get some different thoughts in there for you guys. But that is what the pattern of zoning is in this area. We'll also tell you, and you will see in seconds, if you haven't noticed already, additional meeting, start drilling down farther into zoning. A very complex topic, but one that's very important in this area. It's just simply a thrown in here real quick. Staff did a presentation to City Council a few months ago. It's actually a very good presentation. I had a chance to go through it. I want to talk through you guys with that presentation, as well as adding some additional discussions to it. I don't have time to get into it tonight, but we do want to do that and drill down to it. So that's where we looked at expanding and creating several different, maybe refreshing and looking at the zoning of this area farther. So we're going to get into that at a future meeting. The next meeting we do have is a workshop we've got planned for the 15th, which is a visual preference survey. Really want to encourage all of you to be there and to invite your friends and neighbors and anybody else that you think cares about the character and look and appearance of this area. I'm going to run you through the slides we've got for that in a second. We're not going to vote on them and talk about them now. I do want to give you a preview of what that's going to look like. But I really do want to encourage everybody to come out. Absolutely anybody that comes, tell them to bring their phone, because they're going to need it, because we're going to use phones or tablets or whatever you've got to vote on these things, so we can get results live while we're doing this.
Nice.
What we will do is we'll look at a slide, let people vote on it. And if it comes back either strongly loving it or strongly hating it, we might pause and talk about it for a few minutes so I can get a feel and a sense for what really good or really bad about an image. If it comes out neutral, I'm probably going to zip past it and go on to the next one because we do have a lot of images to look at. But I'll give you a preview of that in a second. This is a really key part of what we're doing, and it's really important for us so that we have a good feel and understanding of what you guys want to see and what you don't want to see. So that we can write the guidelines, it's reflective of what the community and the steering committee wants to see. So really hope everybody can make it out to that. If you can't make it out to that, or your friends and neighbors can't make it out to that,
Yeah,
we are going to post the same survey
okay.
to the project website. And it's going to be live for about 2 or 3 weeks. Got a pretty short time frame to keep things moving, but we are going to have it available on the website. So anybody that is open to do it, the entire community, but it is important. And for me, it's always best to hear directly from you. So to have that conversation is important, but you will still be able to vote and participate if you can't show up to the meeting.
So, and the 15th does present a problem for me. I do have a conflict. So you're saying that 2 or 3 days after that, it will be open to go on and to,
Yeah, probably the next day. So we go to the website.
Yes.
From next couple of weeks.
okay,
I want that bill.
okay.
That Fifth Street.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So this is our timeline, right? We've got the workshop next week on the 15th. I have added, okay, guys, it's a steering committee meeting on January 5th, where we can start drilling down, talking about some of these zoning issues. There's too much to cover in these meetings. I don't want to go for a 4-hour meeting with you guys because
Oh my gosh.
my voice would go and you get tired as well. So,
Food.
anyway, proposing an extra meeting there. We already had a steering committee set for January 26th. We're going to have the draft guidelines and the draft zoning stuff done for you by then. We'll get to you in advance of that so you can take a look at it. But I want to have a really good discussion. And we've also reserved February 2nd for another steering committee meeting. So we maybe have gotten going a little slower than you wanted, but we're picking up steam really rapidly right now to kind of meet this and get it going with the idea that we would be then before the Planning and Zoning Committee for a review of the guidelines and zoning on February 14th and have it to the City Council by the 21st. It's fairly aggressive. Now, this isn't obviously the whole plan. This is just the design guideline stuff and the zoning piece. But we were charged with getting it done by February 1st, and that's what we kind of got to do to meet that. So that is where we are headed next.
Christine or Brad, we've sent invites to the committee for steering committee meetings, except for the 5th, right? We'll be sending that out.
You'll get them this week for sure.
Okay, Brad, can you switch over to the other PowerPoint or the PDF? I want to give you a preview of where we're headed for the design guideline for this thing. Like I said, what we will be doing in the meeting is using your phone to vote on it and going through that thing. We've got a little bit of presentation up front that's going to talk about the character and what design guidelines are so that everybody understands what these are and how you apply it and use it. We are going to have Ed Torres with Bauer Latosa, who's an architectural firm that specializes in historic preservation, is working closely with us here on this project. He will be here at the workshop, and we've worked closely with him to pick out these images and slides. We're just going to kind of run through it fairly quickly with you right now, just so you can see and preview of what that is. When you see these images and slides, if there's something that you think, and I'm not, I will guarantee you won't like all the images, because that's part of the process, is to kind of rule out the bad stuff and focus on the good stuff, right? But if there's a type of image, something that you don't see when we scroll through these fairly quickly, that you think should be in here, that I do need to know about, so that we can make sure that we can still try to roll it in and integrate it. So, Brad, can you kind of start scrolling through these? So in the presentation, I'll talk about the timeline, the process, just so people understand that next.
Thanks, Brad.
I got it.
So I'm going to talk about why guidelines, just pretty much keep going. It's designed to showcase the character of the area, define what the values are that we're looking for in new development, provide direction for developers so they understand what the city and the community wants to see happen in this area, and set some expectations so the residents know that if something is going to be developed next door or on this block or whatever, it should be matching and following these guidelines. You know, we're going to talk about things like scale and character, right? You wouldn't want a 5-story building next to a ranch and that kind of thing. So we'll talk about stepping up and that kind of thing next. We'll talk about elements of architecture that can be used to soften the appearance of buildings and those kind of things. Next.
It works.
You know, talk about setbacks of structures and some of the zoning things that you deal with in terms of bulk regulations, in terms of height, in terms of setback, in terms of coverage of lots, and all those kind of things are part of the conversation. Next. Then Ed is going to talk a little bit about what is history. We've had that conversation before, right? And is it, you know, defined to a certain period? Is it the people of the area? Is it all of those things combined? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Go ahead. And, you know, some of the historic elements of downtown area. Scott, the booklet that you gave me, I think this is out of it, or if it's not, it's very similar to what was in that, right? Next. And just talk a little bit about the history of the area and the character and some of the things that we're thinking about. So these are shots of the area. Next. And the people of the area. This is a little blurry, but nonetheless, we have an expert, several experts in this room on this particular topic. And how diversity and sustainability and those things need to be thought about in the process of developing the guidelines, and those will be integrated as well. Ed is working on this Abuelas project, and I'm not going to spoil the story behind it, but it's pretty interesting, and it celebrates the Hispanic history of certain areas of certain communities across the area, and it kind of relates a little bit to this area as well. So I think that's important.
Cool.
Okay, so then we're going to pull out everybody's phones. We'll explain how to do it, and we'll get into these survey images.
Working on.
And what we're talking about is main categories of kind of what's the overall built form of the area, what it's like on the ground floor of the area, what our streetscape is like in terms of the landscape, the art, signage, lighting, all those kind of elements. And we've got a few that talk about screening and those kind of elements as well. So. Go ahead, next. This won't be in there, so when we started, we had a good conversation with staff to try to define these image areas, and it's going to involve some discussion with you guys. We're going to do that on the 5th. We didn't want to get hung up on that too much right now, so we're going to come back to that. So with that, you can basically just scroll through these images fairly quickly. I'm not going to talk to any more of them. We'll be rating and reviewing all of these.
You're so cute. Cool. I like the second balcony. That was cool.
Well, keep going.
Rooftop. Cute.
Oh, I love that ice cream place. Love that. I should own it. Open up an ice cream shop. Want to open up an ice cream shop? Okay. Find some capital. Oh, I love this.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. That's right. That's right.
I did, I got it in 20 years.
You are into marketing.
That's cool.
Do you sell ice cream?
No, such.
I did it 20 years ago.
Oh,
It
okay.
failed miserably. I averaged $7.81 a day.
Ice cream? People didn't come
We
down?
didn't sell much in the winter.
Oh, I see.
I had a big ice cream cone in the window. But that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Times.
So obviously, there's a lot of images here, right? And part of me wants to take half of these out and scale it back. Hoping what we see when we do this and we evaluate these is that we're going to come out with an average of like, and do it on a 5-point scale, right? So 5 you really love and 1 you really hate, right? If it comes out of 3, it's kind of neutral. And if it comes out of 1 or another, those are the ones I want to talk about and stop. I am going to make sure that the meeting stays within a reasonable time frame. So at the second point, if we're running out of time, we're going to go through them pretty quickly and just have the poll results and not have a conversation about it. Because there are a lot of images here. But honestly, in developing design guidelines, there's a lot of stuff I got to think about and understand where you guys want to go with. So So that's kind of where we're going with it. Honestly, I would say if somebody does have an image you really want us to throw in here, shoot me an email. Steve, thank you, thank you, thank you. You gave us a lot of good images. It was very helpful for that. But honestly, it was probably another 30 slides originally that we put in this thing, right? Because there's so many things you can think about and look about. But I'm really excited for the workshop next week. I hope you can make it. And if you can't, absolutely do the online poll and give us some feedback that way. Because it really is important for us to understand what you guys like and what you like, so that we can develop guidelines that really fit the character of this area. That's what I got.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Does anyone have any other questions or comments before we end this evening? Yes, Vicky.
I do. I have a comment and it goes back to, as we're talking about zoning, as we're talking about planning, my one question is how far, let's say, for example, railroad, how far on railroad will the plan be looked at, or will it be looked at and recommendations be made? Is it just 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th?
No, pretty much everywhere from IB to first.
So down through there.
area.
Another question I have, as you know, I often call it the tale of two cities, but the character, that's a unique and, good thing about Valley Junction. It's the different pockets that make it, is the characteristics of what it is. So west of 8th Street, you mainly just have 100 zone there, 100. And so I often think about what exactly, and is there any plan for that area, the residential area? And the reason why I ask that question is because often there's an impression, or at least an inference, that there's no plan for that residential area. And it's small, like you have commercial, no, you're gonna have to help me, Clyde. Commercial from 14th to 12th Street or 11th Street Alley. And then
That's Valley Junction Industrial along railroad from the alley between 11th and 12th all the way over to 14th.
so when you're talking about the residential zone, I think it starts at 11th, 10th, and 9th Street. Just the 100 block. So I have a real concern about that because Clyde and maybe Scott may know of this history. At one time, there was a plan as to what type of zoning and use would be there. I'm wondering, and there was mention, there was discussion about light industrial. So I'm wondering if there is a plan for any particular use in that area, because
Spin it back to you, Vicki. What do you want to see happen in that area? Because that's part of this planning process, right? That area is in our study area. If you want to see something different than what's out there, talk to us and we can look at ways to reason.
well, I could tell you, it's residential.
If you want to preserve it as residential and keep it as residential,
It's residential, but there's more, and I'm trying to look at it. It's residential, but there's more light industrial and industrial uses.
well, there is, yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
in that area.
It's all residential.
Well,
From,
Oh, you're saying 11th, I'm saying 11th, 10th, and 9th.
11th, the big
Yeah.
colors, right? Yellow is residential.
Yeah, my preference,
Industrial.
yes, preference would be that it remains residential. But if the city doesn't enforce the uses in that area, like industrial, light industrial, legal non-conforming, then you're creating an environment, and what we have brought to the city's attention, and thank Renee for listening, and the mayor and all for listening, is we have some unique problems down there that cause environmental issues, air pollution issues, ground contamination, water issues. And now consequently, I'm saying that because of the failure of enhanced code enforcement on the legal non-conforming, there's created health hazard issues.
specifically about the use there at 11th and Railroad.
I am, that's included.
Okay.
And it's gotten out of control. I mean, even the sign, I don't think is even code compliance. You know? So, but it's one thing for the residents to continue, and I'm gonna say at least, last I looked at my notes, at least 30 years. And now we're beginning to experience health hazards.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, does the city want that plan to remain residential, or is there a plan to, and I'm particularly talking about the 11th,
I'm talking about a
9th,
use there. It's an automotive repair, but it's legal.
you know,
yeah. Legal non-conforming.
we're surrounded. So I'm just asking the question that if there is a thought or a use, just let us know.
All the commercial that.
No.
No.
Because at one time there was.
Well, as a matter of fact, it's not been that many years ago that all of the light industrial along Maple, other than, Corn States and used to be Ramco Electric, I'm not sure what they call it now. But
It's still,
Fuller Tractor and all that stuff, the Chrome place, that all went away and became residential. That's what's on the yellow on
yeah,
the.
and that's what we're talking.
That's gonna stay. I mean, I haven't heard anybody talk about changing that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because that mixed zoning was changed 92, 96. And with that, as you said, there was, I think it was Fuller Tractor, there was Tuttle Racing, and Brody's Grocery and Royce. All of that, the city lived up to what the resolution was, but for the Birch property now formerly known as Royce. I won't go any further with that. But I'm just wondering if there's another use being suggested that we don't know about. If so, just let us know. Because there's nothing that's being improved.
No.
Bring it to.
One time there was.
Mhm.
I'm thinking like where the guys got the, for lack of a better term, storage trailers and stuff over there around 12 or so.
Oh, yeah, he bought the residential properties and tore the houses down and now he's got the pods there.
And
I think he's got plans to build houses there, but
But that's still zoned industrial. That's light industrial zoning.
not on,
Isn't it?
not on 12.
Look at 12.
Yeah, but he,
industrial.
Yeah,
but he's building houses. I mean, that's what he told me when I talked to him. He's gonna build a house up there.
Okay.
legal non-conforming. If he tears it down, he can't build it back up.
I don't know.
That is light industrial. And it's right there on your Valley Junction.
Valley Junction, light industry.
I don't know the difference. You could tell me. But this is not the time. I just want to bring it up because it's not, I like it to see legal non-conforming use as one of the bullet points.
Okay.
And that would take care of everything. I believe without the bullet points, may not get much discussion or consideration, or there may be an inference later when it goes further that wasn't a big issue. That's all.
That's good.
Duly noted.
Meredith, you had a resident in the back who had their hand raised.
Yes, and I was gonna say too, I wanted to make a couple comments and then I wanted to hear what people thought about comments from the presentation as well back here, since I get an opportunity to speak. I know one thing, a couple of takeaways that I thought was really great from the presentation about ideas here. Obviously the murals, I think are needed here. One thing I learned from Nick and Jason when they were here from Small Nation is there's a company, it's called Lind Sign Spring, and they're interchangeable murals. And so it's basically kind of a frame system. And so you can interchange, so it has less maintenance, and there are these screens that kind of you put up, but they hold up very well, and they have them in their area, and they thought that it will work really well down here too. And then as far as like the pop-up shops and the micro retail, like those sheds that you talked about, I think Jewel is another community in our state here that has those, and they've been doing very well. I spoke with their executive director of their Main Street program earlier this summer, and they're just small little sheds that they do for either makers or local artists or anything like that, or kind of small businesses kind of testing the waters before they do get a brick and mortar. And they said they're just rented all the time. One other concept kind of similar to that you could do if you don't want to do the sheds is people are doing amazing things with storage containers right now and doing really creative uses with those. I don't know how practical, again, I'm not always the most practical person. I'm kind of more of a creative person, but what if could we get old boxcars and tie into that railroad history?
Cute. That's fun.
And kind of maybe,
Downtown Phoenix, an area called Santana Row.
yes,
They use actually the cargo containers, and they'll do the pop-up stores,
yeah.
galleries, things like that.
Yep, but especially, I mean, if they're doing storage containers, I mean, I don't know the likelihood of boxcars, but it ties into our history then too. So kind of like our caboose in Rural Park, but
Fun.
just
Yeah,
kind of
that's
a
cute.
interesting concept.
Demand for storage containers right now.
That's true.
Maybe after the pandemic.
Yeah, after that.
Give it a little bit. Yeah.
Anyway.
Great idea.
With these storage containers sitting around, they don't know how to get rid of them.
There you go. Just wait for that opportunity. But anyway, those are just kind of some of my ideas.
Fun.
Be living in them next.
I definitely want to open it up to anyone who has comments or questions or feedback here. Yeah, Nick?
Yeah, I'm looking at slide 60 here. And I think we've got the 100 block along the road. Around Valley Junction storage business to include up to first three blocks.
Okay, just so you know where this came from, right?
Please.
This was in a presentation that staff did to city council.
Like development services.
Right, a while back. This is not our proposal, first of all. This is just something that was thrown out as a way to begin to talk about the zoning in these different areas. So this is not.
It hasn't, Nick, it hasn't gone anywhere other than staff presenting it to us about what could happen. And that's where it's all
Where,
at.
I mean, when I had a conversation with Clyde, Brad, and Christine a little bit about it, we certainly talked about, but if we want to think about railroad, it probably doesn't go up this far, right? It's probably much more narrow along railroad and it doesn't go up there. So there's definitely things like that we got to talk about. We got to talk about the edges and where they fit in this area, and that needs to be a more involved conversation. We're going to have that conversation at our next steering committee. So it's important. We got to get there. We're just not there yet. So don't get hung up on this map yet.
That's the one on January 5th. Right?
Yeah, it's on January 5th.
Any other comments?
I'd like to, I loved a lot of what I saw today. I really especially loved, and forgive me, I forget the name, but the Dutch streetscape. I was in Crested Butte this summer and they have done something similar in their commercial area. Instead of removing curbs though, they have built movable planters out of corrugated steel and wood. So they seasonally, depending on what the demand is, and because some businesses come and go, they can use those planters to kind of carve out dining space without removing the parking for the rest of the year. So that could be a solution. We wouldn't have to remove the curbs or anything, but I do like the bump out, so all of it's good. Yeah.
Excellent. Great idea.
In your pictures, that since they will make them. There's a picture for next week.
Oh, for the original preference survey. Yeah, we can do that if you want to. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at the crosswalks, bump outs, like you said, or continuous sidewalks.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that. Thanks.
Oh, and maybe too, if you did kind of that crosswalk at Railroad and Fifth, I know we talked to Linda Schimmel earlier about doing decorative crosswalks. I think technically they're not crosswalks, but it's more of like an art installation. But if you had that like press button so people could walk, then how cool would it be to have this kind of artwork leading into the entrance of Valley Junction?
That's cool.
Like it.
Oh,
Love it.
whoa,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Nice.
Anyway, yes, any other comments? Tom?
I was just saying to kind of tie with the crosswalk, I mean, your three lanes is 6, if you count the turning.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Even then with a light, that's a lot of concrete for people to walk across, so maybe I like the idea of a road diet on Railroad, not the whole stretch of it, but maybe it's a 2-block stretch where it goes down to 30. No, people will probably hate that and drive it, but if you look at what they did with the Heights on University recently, they did a really nice job. There's actually, they did from 25 to 30.
They did, yeah.
And they did some really nice landscaping. It was very, very nice.
Yeah.
Just a real quick comment and a question. So talk about murals. We talked to the owners of 214 Fifth, Two Oaks Wealth Management. They've repaired and primed their wall, and they do plan on putting a privately funded mural on their wall in the spring. A guy who's done them kind of all over the state. And then I had a question about, so when I see it with the design guidelines, it's really two things. One is the visual preference survey and the design guidelines, and the other is the enforcement question, or is there going to be enforcement? So how is that going to be addressed? Are they going to be just guidelines and here they are on paper? We hope you do it. Is there going to be talk of a design overlay, a preservation ordinance? I mean, there's a lot of different levels there.
Yeah, we've got to get there. The guidelines are awesome, right? But we got to have some mechanism to essentially require developers on that, right? So whether it's, and I haven't figured out the exact yet, right?
For being there, just.
It'd be a design overlay where it's essentially required, as long as the guidelines are, I do feel it's important to give some flexibility, right? I don't want to tell them that you got to use, I don't know, red number 5 brick or whatever, right? All right, we don't want to be that prescriptive, but we do want to give them clear direction. And the guidelines are worthless if you don't implement them in some way. So we got to have a mechanism to do that. And how they're going to be reviewed, how a project's going to be compared to those guidelines and who's going to do it. We have to have that as part of the conversation and part of the solution.
And that will all be done on the same timeline as the rest of this?
I mean, that's part of probably is zoning ordinance changes.
Okay.
That would say, within this area, these are the design guidelines that you have to adhere to be able to develop.
I wanted to expand on the comment about the crosswalk at Fifth and Railroad with it being 5 lanes. At 50th Street, I don't know if it's, was it not Westwood, I can't think which street it is, just north of EP or south of EP True. That street is 5 lanes. It's got the hawk beacon and it functions just fine. I mean, it's timed so that people have more than enough time to walk across that road.
Cool.
So it's not an issue of like, oh, you got to hurry and get across.
Not a 100-yard dash.
Right.
That's good.
You sit there, I mean, I use that road quite a bit and just sit there for a long time after the people have crossed, waiting for the light to turn off so you can go.
Yeah, cool.
I think, one of my concerns about the result of this exercise is that we will lose opportunities to find very exceptional architectural moments that may not look historic, and that will end up with anything new being an average replica of something that is marginal, will just feel marginal and will be a neutral event for the community. And I think, so I don't know, there's just this concern is how do we make sure we're still finding exceptionalism, but yet we're trying to define standards. You know, it's kind of like, how do you do both?
Don't want to be restricted.
Great point, Julie.
And I'd just like to add, because this is open mic now at this point, is that, and again, this purpose of us is coming up with some guidelines. I just think we want to be really careful too, that we're not so restrictive with guidelines that we really deter development and we deter folks wanting to come in this area to revitalize and to revamp, but still keep historic. So I think we're all here to try to maintain some historic preservation, and there are tons of ways we can do this. I love murals. I love signs, you know, these big signs that you can put on buildings where people stop. I was at a rest area when I was going to Chicago and they had all this history there. I'm trying to run to the restroom, but I'm standing outside reading all the history of that area that they had placard on that. And I was like, it was fascinating. It was just fascinating. And so I just think we want to be real careful that it's not so restrictive, whereby which developers are saying, I cannot come in this community. It doesn't allow me to do this. I'm moving elsewhere. So we want to be real careful. We don't step on our own toes.
Agreed.
I
Yeah,
totally.
I mean, just in terms of the planning world, the planners went through this whole phase, has evolved over time, right? But there's concept of there's basically focus on the design and not so much the use of the property, right? Some communities have gone so far with that nothing happens, because it's so restrictive and it's so, you gotta do this or nothing, and they do nothing, right? And we don't want that, right? We want to still allow, that's why I generally like the guideline approach.
Kevin.
Right, it's gotta be careful and it's gotta be appropriately applied to allow for the flexibility while still respecting the character of the area. So it's a balancing act, and it's not gonna be easy, folks. I'll pretty much bet there's gonna be something in my first draft you're not gonna like. I don't know what it is yet, because I haven't written it yet, but it's gonna be something that you don't like, and we'll have to talk through those things and work it out. But
The beginning of your presentation with all the people speaking about things, the number one thing was that they don't want to lose the historic aspect.
Right.
Not once did I see anything in there that said, yes, we need more low-income apartment buildings. And that's what we've said from the beginning, and they don't fit in. And I think the most important things are the history and the conformity to looking like other things in the area, looking historic.
What does low income have with architecture and design?
Well, any apartment buildings, actually, because it doesn't matter
Yeah.
low income or not, they don't fit in, they're an eyesore, we hear this all day, every day from customers. And it just, you go to the 100 and 200 block and it's so cool looking at all the different little buildings. And then you get to the 300 block and it's ugly. It's just, that's my opinion, and I'm entitled to my opinion.
Other people have opinions too, and they like it.
I know, but
That's gonna be the function of this activity.
did you see anything there that said, yeah, we need more low-income apartments or any apartments at all? No, we need
No
more
one has to explicitly say that to infer that people want more housing though. And like,
family housing is what Des Moines has always said.
well, we have a great plot by Phoenix. There's a lot of grass there, but we can't build on it because some made it hard to do that.
That only occurred because there were no apartments left. So.
Yeah.
I'm talking about in the business district that's supposed to be retail and dining.
I'm right at the edge of the historic. I mean, that's a perfect example.
You're not in Fifth Street in the first 3 blocks.
But there was no housing
That's what I'm talking about.
available
And the people farther up don't want to sell their houses. They've said that over and over.
Steve, you had a comment?
Just a couple things. So, if you didn't get a chance to watch it, there was a really phenomenal, webinar the other day. Christine was a part of it. Talk about housing, affordable housing in particular, but housing in the metro area in general is an absolute eye opener. What was it, Christine? It was 16, the housing costs went up 16% this year and they expect it to go up another 16% in the next 12 months. So affordable housing, not low income, but just affordable housing is a huge issue. I would encourage, I would maybe encourage staff to send out a link to that webinar because it was excellent.
Clay?
And along with that, and I had asked Christine this a while ago. So when people talk about income levels for housing, low to moderate income, 80% of the median income for a single family household in Polk County is $51,150. So when you're thinking low income is 51,000 compared to medium income, that's the 80% level. So think about when we talk about our neighbors and our employees and our coworkers, a lot of them qualify for that. So.
And that's fine, but I'm saying in our retail, our shopping and dining district has now become shopping, dining and big apartment buildings.
But those aren't apartment buildings, they're mixed use. There's no apartments on the ground floor.
I was told there was going to be retail and nobody can afford the retail.
But there's no residential on the first floor. They are commercial.
I know, but.
So I'm saying they're not apartment buildings, they're mixed use buildings.
It's called gentrification and that's what's happening.
I would say stopping development contributes to that because it stops up the supply when the demand increases.
But it's happened in the East Village already. You come in and you redo all that stuff and then they jack the rent up and nobody can afford it and businesses start closing and we'll have the problem we had in the 80s with half the buildings empty.
And that's really, I think this webinar kind of addresses that from a housing standpoint because it talks about, the fact is the demand is increasing, the population's increasing here. So we have to find ways to meet that supply. I don't think we're going to meet the supply. I think housing is going to continue to.
Why does our 3 blocks of Fifth have to meet that supply? Those apartments that Scott Cutler has built would look beautiful out at Jordan Creek. Why do they have to be in his?
Because people want to live here. People want to live on Fifth Street.
All full, right, Scott?
And I would argue that trying to build
Man for more.
that looks historic could look terrible as well. I mean, we can't rebuild historic buildings from 100 years ago. Trying to build.
There are ways you can make them look.
Right, but I mean, I guess back to my comment about being exceptional is if we try to just make everything look historic now, we're not going to get there. And then it's
historic Valley Junction.
But those buildings are built, so I think the thing to do is move on and not worry about them. They're built. We can't do anything about those. And they are going to be part of Historic Valley Junction for the next 100 years or more.
I don't think they'll live that long. They're already cracking. The drywall's already cracking.
Like you said the same thing about
I like you have a concern about apartments in the commercial district.
They don't look like they fit in. They're too tall.
Wait a minute, let me finish. So we do have buildings that have 2 and 3 stories in the 1 and 200 blocks. And are you suggesting that we shouldn't have apartments in any of those other stories?
No, those are existing historic buildings. They've been there for years and years and years.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, I was trying to understand your concern.
But nobody can afford to put apartments in them. So they sit empty.
I think the big thing here is, you're talking about the apartments that have been built or are on track to be built. Those have already happened. There's nothing we can do about that, to say. But with this process, this is where we have the opportunity to give our opinions and feedback going forward. So I think the important thing is to focus on that and going forward rather than dredging up what has occurred, because it can't change anything.
I don't doubt that the restaurant at 111 Fifth will turn into a 3-story apartment building before we know it. Plans aren't final on that.
I would.
The one across from St. Kilda's, that's yours too. That was going to be another 3-story apartment building. Try being in my store close to in the 300 block and listening to these people all day long come in and say, what is going on? Valley Junction isn't Valley Junction anymore.
And just,
Valley Junction is ugly. What is that great big building across the street? And I'm like, well, that's an even bigger apartment building than the one by the quilt block. And they're like, oh my God, you're kidding. Why isn't it retail? I mean, I hear this all.
Well, they should open a store if you want to be retail.
Hey, I know what side you're on. You're a friend of Scott Cutler's. You always defend him.
You're just
defend
out of your.
okay, let's have some decorum.
Listen to her at all these meetings, and I'm sorry, I disagree with you, Nan. I think you're instigating some of your customers to believe what you believe.
No, they come and ask what it is.
Let's listen. You've had a great opportunity for weeks and months. We have customers at our store who come in and they say, this is great. This is great. There's so much going on here in Valley Junction. So many new stores, so many nice restaurants. So I truly believe that old and new can coexist. Because if you look at the history of Valley Junction and the decades of which buildings were built, there are buildings that were built after the war that are just plain Janes. They don't have architectural elements. They're coast to coast hardware stores built out of just metal and glass. And there's nothing significant about them. So when you talk about something being historic and wanting something historic, we have to have a definition. What is historic? Is it the 1890s, the 50s, the 30s, the 20s? What is it? What is the definition of historic? What should it look like? And who's to say that the buildings and the architecture that is relevant right now, decades down the road, won't be considered historic as well?
Well, we're not going to be here that many decades down the road. I'm talking about now in the first 3 blocks.
What's going to happen for the future?
So a couple things I want
No,
to chime in here.
I want to chime in.
Renee, go ahead.
Oh, did you say Debbie?
Debbie did have some.
Okay, let Debbie go and then I'll go.
Okay, Debbie, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I've been listening a lot during this meeting, and it seems like this is really part of the essence of the conversation that created the impetus for this second master plan. And what I have tried to do, and what I would encourage everyone to do, is to realize that everyone that speaks with the validity of their own thoughts, feelings, conviction, and perspective about not just what is historic, but what is Valley Junction. And when I was in graduate school and then teaching at Drake, I was very involved with Valley Junction and went to merchants meetings and had a city planner come out that was very well known. And he did a seminar, and the same discussion that we're having today took place at that time. What is historic? In fact, Maury Knudsen, that was across from the theatrical shop, encouraged the city. I don't know, Clyde, if you were here at the time, but to pass a resolution that all new buildings had to be in the style of it was something like 1890 to 1920. And there was such a discussion about this. And the planner that came out and spoke to the group said, Valley Junction, part of its uniqueness is that it is a storyboard of our history. There are coast to coast 1950s buildings. There's the previous meat locker. There's where there used to be the West Des Moines Express. There are concrete block buildings. There's Atomic Garage, but there are also buildings like the Herman Raz block and the theatrical shop and others that were built much earlier in the century. And part of the brand that I've always thought of myself as Valley Junction is that we get to see remnants, artifacts, manifestations of who we were at that point in our history. So we're able to see all of that in one place. I still don't have a connection with the SharePoint, but I will make sure that happens and post some quotations by Stephanie Weeks, who has been the president for 9 years of the National Historic Trust, who has written so beautifully and so poignantly about the significance of buildings that have been part of our past. And she says, when we remember our past, we think of the places where our life events have taken place. And those buildings help us recreate what our lives have been. I guess I would like for people to realize that all of these different parts of who we are tell our story. We have a story. That's our brand. That's what people love. And whether or not I'm a choreographer, I'm a creative person. I don't like restriction, but I've spent a lot of my life choreographing things for individual students. And I always try to look for the truth within them. It's my creative work, but it's about them. It's about the story that they want to tell. And when we look at our buildings that exist and we look at our community, what is our brand? What is the story we want to tell? We can't ignore that, but I think that what this discussion has become today is the crux of what we actually need to be talking about. But I hope that everyone understands that everyone that's speaking is very heartfelt about their opinions, and we need to try to receive those messages and process them in a way that we can come together as a community and a neighborhood. That's my comment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie. Renee?
Debbie, I appreciate your comments, and, you know, I want to share a few thoughts too. We are all around this table because we have a passion for this area. We have a passion for what is to come and what currently is. And my thought is that, again, I think we do need to be civil when we are visiting with people about their various opinions. I think we shouldn't accuse people of whose side people are on, because that does not build for a unit of a team that is wanting to express their thoughts and feelings. And I also am going to say this, and I feel like the whole notion of affordable housing, we also need to talk about that at some point as it relates to what this city really needs. We need more affordable housing, by the way. We need it. We can argue where or whatnot. And we need to truly make sure that we get rid of this stigma about low income apartments. When I hear that, I wonder, what do you mean by low income apartments? And we need to get the stigma out of those words a little bit and understand that affordable housing is for your grandkids, for your senior parent, for people that are working the retail stores that are on that district, for the people that are working at Nance Nummies, for the people that are working at Momere that can't afford housing. That's what affordable low-income housing is. But there are some stereotypes about what it is that at some point we got to come real about that and address what it really is and what it really means, and how a city that's going to thrive to keep their residents here has all levels of housing to keep them here, because they're all levels of needs. And so I know we're not here to deal with affordable housing issues, but it somehow creeps in sometimes when we're talking about certain apartments. And I think we need to keep it real. And I think we need to address that elephant in the room from time to time. And we got to truly understand what it is. I'm a firm believer that this city involves all kinds of folks that have fixed incomes, that are rich, that are in the middle class, that are struggling when they graduate from college to say, well, what do I do? Do I go find something in Des Moines, or do I really want to stay somewhere where there's affordable housing in a community, in an area that I enjoy and I love? That's what's going to make West Des Moines thrive. So I just wanted to get this out there about my thoughts about affordable housing. Call it low-income housing if you want to. I want us to be careful how we use words and how we construe what people think about low-income housing, and check any biases that we have, because apartments that are affordable for all kinds of people is really important in West Des Moines. It is important.
Where it's located, that's another discussion for another day. But I just felt the need, and I haven't ever shared that publicly in a while since I've been elected as a city council person. But I've talked to a whole lot of people about this notion of low-income housing. And we need to get the stereotype out about what people say about low-income housing and the kind of people they think live in low-income houses. And look in the mirror. Look around your whole area and see who needs affordable housing. There's a whole lot of people, a whole lot of people. And I hope that we will continue to try to make progress on what we're doing. I thought this meeting was great, but we've got to be respectful of people's opinions. We can't accuse people of whose side people are on, share our thoughts and move forward. And we are not all going to get our way. No one in this room is going to get everything they want, not one person. But we're going to hopefully have a collective process that still restores the historic nature of this district area, but yet also is primed to invest in this area so that it stays alive, but yet still historic. And I saw so many images on the screen today that allows for ways in which you can keep history alive and show the history, placards and murals and metal plates on buildings that have people stop and read what happened here, what did all that. So I just want us to be real open to other ways that we can still restore the historic nature of this town, this district, and how it can still be history taught to many people beyond us. That's just what I wanted to get out there, and that's what I wanted to say.
Well said.
And
volumes.
we're not going to all get our way, but we've just got to be able to respect that we're going to have differences of opinion, and things are going to be a little bit different, but some things are going to stay the same.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. And oh, sorry. Yeah, with that, is there any more discussion? Because I'm sure we could all talk about Valley Junction all night in this room.
I have a lot of people on it.
I would think that that's a good place to stop for tonight, and kind of really reflect on everything that we were presented with the information tonight. And hopefully we can have a wonderful meeting next Wednesday, coming up with all these visual preferences. So again, thank you, Mike, for coming here. Thank you, everyone, for the lively discussion this evening. And
Presentation.
yes, and wonderful presentation. So with that, I think we will go ahead and adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
All moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I assume there's no opposed.
Robert's Rules of Orders. Don't need a second on adjournment.
Oh, always go back.
Yeah, you don't need a motion.
But
Okay, fantastic. I've been in meetings where there's